Welcome back to part 2 of the 2-part series where I go over my takeaways from the Alex and Layla Hormozi workshop. In part 2, I go over the most important part of scaling a business and my learnings around it. I talk about some learnings I had that weren't necessarily intended to be taught, but more observations of the event itself. A beautiful lesson on leadership that I picked up from Layla Hormozi. And I close with a really powerful lesson on branding. So, hope you guys enjoy. My next learning was more of a reiteration of something that I already knew, but it was a very powerful display of how important talent is. For those of you who are new to this channel, I spent 14 years working at Target, and I worked myself up to overseeing a territory of 82 stores. I was part of a team that saw 82 stores, and those 82 stores did more than $4 billion a year in revenue. And so it was a pretty big business that we led. And what was so apparent to me when I was at that company is the higher I got, the more impressive people I was around. And I really enjoyed that. And the amount of time that we spent as a leadership team, there were 5 of us that oversaw this $4 billion business. The amount of time that we spent doing stuff like succession planning, 18 months out, who's going to go here, who's going to be in what seat, what does this person need to be successful, etc., was insane. I mean, we would have these 2-day meetings where we must have spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of payroll with how much people in that room were getting paid, all just talent planning. And honestly, that was the majority of that role, right? Like I ran stores. I came up through Target in, assistant manager, store manager, and then above and beyond like a territory manager. And the territory I was a part of was like 82 stores. And the lower I was in the company, the more it was about simple execution. And there were some important leadership lessons embedded early. Obviously, the better you were at leadership, the better you were at every role during that path. But as I continued to move up in the stores organization, what was so evident is if there was ever an issue, it always came back to a person, right? So we would fly around in private jets because the stores were all over 3 different states, and the most efficient way to see them was to fly. And if there was ever a store that was in shambles, it was usually because the store director, that's what Target called them, was bad. And I tie that back to this workshop because every single leader that I engaged with, which were the leaders of the portfolio company, and again, the leaders of their portfolio company are the ones that are spending time with their portfolio companies, the companies that they invest in, and are helping their specific, leadership skills. So like they're the marketing person, right? I'm having trouble articulating, but the portfolio leader in charge of marketing, well, they are the ones in charge of helping their portfolio companies that they have invested in grow in terms of marketing and so on and so forth. Every single one of those people I spent time with was incredibly impressive, very articulate, very intelligent, very giving. The amount of time that each of them would spend with or attempt to spend with everyone in that room to try and give them value, make their businesses better, it was very impressive. And so seeing the scale of, we essentially got to witness a business that's doing hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue per year, which wasn't quite as big as the $4 billion that we were running, but it was still very evident that the amount of time that they spend on talent was very high. And so, of course, I take that back. I'm about to hire at least one person, maybe 2. And, something when businesses are newer, it's easier to spend less time hiring because we need help, right? When businesses are new, there's always more to do than there are people. And so sometimes we make these decisions to hire just because, okay, I just need a body. I just need somebody. But what's really interesting is if you take a percentage of employees, if I hire one person, for example, my business is going to go from 3 total people to 4. And so if I go to 4 and I hire one person, that one person I bring on is going to be responsible for 25% of my business in terms of headcount. And so what I find ironic about that is that makes hiring that one person when I have 3 people on my team significantly more important than hiring one person if I were to have 100 people on my team. Yet the businesses who have 100 people on their team spend significantly more time hiring than the business owners when they have 3. And I do think it should be in reverse. The problem is it's just hard because we don't have the time and the resources, and we may not know what to do and how to hire those next people. And so on this path that I'm on, where I'm about to hire someone, I have spent I would say, significant amount of time building the job description, setting expectations on the job description, defining what it is that I want and what I need, developing interview guides that are going to help me assess the right talent, talking to my team about the process of how we're going to interview and hire. And I did all of that before I went to this workshop, and seeing the talent at this workshop just kind of solidified how important and how glad I am that I've made the decision I'm going to spend this much time on hiring. And so if you're a business owner listening to this, or even if you oversee a department or whatever the case may be, I cannot stress enough the importance of talent. Every large business that I've been a part of, talent is the gatekeeper. Talent is everything. And I am committing that I will, I'm sure I won't be perfect, but I will spend an inordinate amount of time ensuring that the person or people who come through the doors of my company are going to be aligned with my values, aligned with my vision, and will have the standards that I have. And so I would encourage you to adopt a similar mentality. The next learning, and I'll go through this one quickly because it's not necessarily pertinent to my specific business, but it was just simply an observation that I had, is just how to put on a good event. I thought they did a phenomenal job keeping the flow of the event going. The food was good. There was no awkward downtime. They had great speakers. And so the things I walked away from on what made the event successful, and it's actually kind of funny, the guy who runs the whole workshop division actually told a story of when they did the first event. It was so bad that they just refunded everyone. And so, I think that's such a good testament to just start and then learn and then get better and then do it again and then get better, do it again, and so on. But anyways, I thought the event was very well organized. And I think what made this event so good, number one, the level of talent that was there. Number two, the level of value that they clearly focused on adding to the audience. And then 3, they did a really nice job having the proper support staff. And so there were 2 ladies that essentially ran around, every time there was a break, for example, they would run and they would gather people and say, hey, it's time to go back inside. And because of that, the event stayed on time. And I've been to events, in other words, where people congregate and it's hard to get back and then time is lost. But they had these 2 ladies that were there, and it was very clear to me that they communicated to those ladies, hey, they're when there's 1 minute left on break, go around and make sure that everyone goes back in. When the speakers were speaking, they held up these iPads and they went around and said 5 minutes left. Those 2 ladies and the support staff, I could tell, were incredibly vital to just the flow and the organization of how that event went. They also picked really good caterers, so the food was great, and they didn't run out of food like I've seen in other events. And so whatever selection process they had for the caterer, I thought was good. And then they also, this was kind of neat, they had this little coffee vendor that was there the entire time. And it was exactly that, a coffee vendor. And they would make espressos and, these little lattes, if you want, that would have a acquisition.com logo on the top of the latte, which I thought was kind of neat. And so kind of a mix of the support staff that kept the room organized and flowing, the catering was great, and then the level of talent, I think, is what led to a really, really good event. And I think lastly, it's kind of a side note, there was a moment in the event where Alex was on stage speaking, and there were 2 or 3 guys like in the front or second row that were talking. And Alex was like listening to a question from someone else, and these other 2 or 3 guys were talking. And Alex actually turned to them and said, "Hey guys, the rest of us can hear you." And it set this perfect frame for the rest of the event that you need to pay attention. And I thought it was just this beautiful example of accountability and how whoever is leading the event can set the stage for accountability and for what it, the expectations. And it didn't come across harsh in my opinion. It was just, "Hey guys, the rest of us can hear you." Very subtle, but the rest of the event, we never really saw any issues with people talking while, someone was on stage. And I have seen that as an issue in the past with events. The next lesson I walked away with was that successful entrepreneurs are not unicorns. I think getting into entrepreneurship, it's easy to think that people who are doing a really nice job are these born entrepreneurs, incredibly intelligent, incredibly smart. And what was really cool about, I've been in big mastermind rooms before. Most of the time, or maybe all of the time, it was just other real estate investors. But being in a room with business owners from all sorts of different industries, and business owners ranging from, $1 million a year all the way up to hundreds of millions of dollars a year, was neat perspective. And the perspective was neat because I didn't look around the room and feel out of place or dumber than anyone else. What was actually kind of neat is it was more the opposite. Is I would look around the room and I would have communication, or I would have interactions with other business owners, and I would think, wow, what's actually inspiring is that if that person can do that, I know I can. And it was just a good frame for me, and I think it helped instill in me that if I simply focus on working hard and I put my attention to the right things and I listen to people who are further along than me and I do what they tell me to do, it's likely that I can achieve some sort of measure of success. And so I find that so powerful because I think growing up, I had this belief, for example, like professional athletes, that they're just amazing specimens. And the more and more I learn about people who do really special things, it's like instead of you study someone who's successful, and instead of thinking, after you've studied them, instead of thinking, wow, that person was just born really smart, you think, well, no shit, that person is successful. Look at everything that they've done. And being in a room full of other entrepreneurs helped reinforce that frame for me. The next lesson, and this one is quick, but just lead with value. I think when people do these types of workshops or events, sometimes it's pretty clear to me when the desired outcome is just to make money or whatever the case. And I thought the entire team did such a phenomenal job of the number one desired outcome the entire time, at least how I felt, was for them to lead with value. And I think that's a good frame for anything that I do in some sort of group setting going forward. The next realization that I had after leaving the event is I had someone ask me, the question was basically like, was the 10 grand worth it? And it was in different words, but that was essentially what I understood the question to be. And as I thought about the answer to that question, obviously everything I've already told you kind of explains my position on that. But the other part of that I haven't talked about that yet is the non-quantifiable return from these events in the relationships that you build. And I built some really cool relationships. Like there were some people there that were part of the acquisition.com team, or maybe other business owners that I really, really enjoyed getting to know. And I may not understand what the value of that relationship between now and the time I die will be. But what I can say is events and masterminds I've gone to in the past, in the moment, I remember meeting specific individuals and it didn't feel special. And then that specific individual had some sort of grand impact on my future. For example, one of the first real estate events I went to, I had just gone into a new market, and I ended up meeting a guy who had built a really impressive business in that market. And long story short, I purposefully invested in that relationship, and that relationship has given me incredible amounts of dividends ever since that occurred. And so I think about that from this event. It's kind of fun to think about, like, oh, what might be the return of the relationships that I built? And I don't know what they will be yet. But looking back, I can just feel that some of the relationships that I did build are going to have an incredible return. And I'm excited about what that's going to be. The next lesson was the importance of leadership. I've already kind of told you my observation of how important talent was for that room. And what was really neat is almost every single leader, maybe even every single one that got up on stage and spoke and that I spoke with individually, they said multiple times, like, the reason I am here is because of Layla Hormozi. And she did one Q&A. She was up on stage for a couple hours. That was the only real interaction that I got to have with her, or observation of her in person. But in all of the content that I've consumed of her and just hearing her team speak, to attract amazing talent, you have to be an amazing leader. And I think that's, for me, that what's very resonating about that, if you listen to any of my other podcast content recently, I'm very focused on becoming a better leader. I think that's in terms of me becoming who I want to be and running the business that I want to become, that I think is a constraint of me being who I want to be. And so that's something I'm very focused on. And so the observation of how amazing that room was and why all of that really, really impressive talent was in that room, and they all attribute the reason to being how amazing of a leader that Layla is, was just so beautiful and telling. And if that doesn't reinforce someone's desire to become a better leader, I'm not sure what other reinforcement is needed. But even just watching her answer delicate questions from the audience and how she behaved with her team, it's very clear to me that she has put a significant, disproportionate amount of effort into being a leader that people want to be around. And the result of that was a room full of extremely impressive talent saying that they were there because of her. And I thought that was just such a cool takeaway. And my last takeaway and learning here was on branding, and just how important it is for brand and how much brand can drive business. The majority, if not all, of that room was because of the brand that Alex and Layla have built. And maybe they run some direct response marketing for their workshops now. I don't really know. But a very large portion of that room, Alex actually asked a question and was like, raise your hand if you've been following me for 3+ years and you came to this workshop. And like 70% of that, I'm making up a percent, but what I would perceive as the hands, the image I have in my head of the hands raised is like 70% of the room raised their hand. And, purely from a financial perspective, I mean, there was 100 people there at $5K a ticket. That's $500K in revenue. And then they had an upsell that they sold that had to drive at least another $1 million in revenue. And so 1.5 million in 2 days, all driven from brand, I think is pretty impressive. And if that doesn't elicit, or if that doesn't demonstrate how powerful it is, then I don't know what else will. But it's the whole weekend, or the whole event was on the beautiful backdrop of this observation I had on how important brand is and how I'm going to continue to double down. And there was something specific I talked to each one of the portfolio leaders about in my business. And the feedback I got from them is, keep doing what you're doing. And what I articulated to them is how important brand is to me. And all of them told me, hey, this is probably going to take some time, but over the course of many years, you are going to see a significant return on it. And so the event itself, and just watching Alex and Layla and filling up a room like that, it reinforced to me how important brand is and just how powerful it can be. And so if you're out there, you have a business and you haven't made a piece of content, or it hasn't been something that you're focused on, all of the signs are pointing to the fact, especially in today's day and age of attention, where attention is so easily grabbed on our phones, on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and Shorts and whatever the next thing is going to be. I think brand is just going to become increasingly more important, because it's very easy nowadays for everyone to have access onto who you are and what it is that you do. And if you can put that out there for the world to see, and you do so in a way that creates positive associations, then that is going to be substantially more valuable than if you do not do that. And so the whole, event, again, was just this reinforcement of how powerful brand is, and how I probably need to put more time and effort, even though sometimes it's hard in the short term because you just want to be focused on, generating immediate income. But I think too, at the same time, that's why it's important to figure out how you can make literally the most amount of money possible, so that you can invest some of that money back into building a long-term brand and focus on a long runway. So those are my takeaways, that I wrote some notes on. There are probably some more things that I didn't talk about, but these were kind of the things that came to mind. And, if you are interested in going to one of these, I would encourage you. Hopefully, as you just heard, I found there to be some tremendous benefit from it. But again, I think too, at the same time, it is what you make it. And so, if you're worried about it being valuable, then maybe that's telling enough that you probably shouldn't go, because the value that you get is going to be up to you anyway. So anyway, I hope you guys got some value out of that. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.